You've seen that when you submit a data step, SAS processes the data step and then creates a new SAS dataset. Let's take a look behind the scenes so that you can understand how that happens. SAS processes a data step in two phases, the compilation phase and the execution phase. During the compilation phase, SAS first scans each line of the data step for syntax errors. When the scanning process is complete, SAS creates the descriptor portion of the new dataset. Remember, the descriptor portion contains information like the dataset name and the names of all the dataset's variables. If the data step compiles successfully, then the execution phase begins. During the execution phase, the data step reads and processes the input data and fills in the values for the output data set. The data set executes once for each observation in the input file unless otherwise directed. Let's take a closer look at the compilation phase. When does SAS create the descriptor portion of the new dataset? SAS creates the descriptor portion of the new dataset at the end of the compilation phase. But what happens during that phase? First, SAS creates something called the program data vector, or PDV. The PDV is a chunk of computer memory where SAS builds the dataset one observation at a time. The PDV contains two automatic variables that can be used for processing, but that are not written to the SAS dataset as a part of an observation. _in_ is the iteration number of the data step. _error_ signals the occurrence of an error that is caused by the data during execution. The default value is 0, which means there is no error. When one or more errors occur, the value is set to 1, a fact which we can use later. During the compilation phase, SAS also scans each statement in the data step looking for syntax errors, such as missing or misspelled keywords, invalid variable names, missing or invalid punctuation, and invalid options. As the data step compiles, a slot is added to the PDV for each variable in the input dataset. Generally, SAS determines attributes like length and type the first time it encounters a variable. In this example, the first time SAS encountered the variables, special instructions were written in the program to make ID, first_name, last_name, and sex character variables. No other special instructions were in the program, so SAS kept all other attributes at their default values. For example, the default length is 8 bytes. At the bottom of the data step, the compilation phase is completed, and the descriptor portion of the new dataset is created. At this point, the data step is ready for execution. Now let's take a look at what happens in the execution phase when SAS creates the data portion of the new dataset. Remember, the data portion contains the data values. At the beginning of the execution phase, SAS initializes the PDV. _in_ is set to 1, _error_ is set to 0, and every other variable in the PDV is set to missing. Remember, SAS represents missing numeric values with periods and missing character values with blanks. In the first iteration of the data step, SAS reads an observation from the input data set and then stores the values in the program data vector. SAS then writes those values out to the new SAS dataset as an observation. Remember that _in_ and _error_ are not included in the new SAS dataset. Then control returns to the top of the data step and the next iteration begins. When reading data from a raw file, as we are here, SAS reinitializes the values of the variables in the PDV to missing and increments the value of _in_ by 1. If we were reading the data from another SAS dataset, the values from the previous iteration would be retained in the PDV until overwritten in the current iteration. As the input statement executes again, SAS writes the values of the second observation to the PDV. At the end of the data step, SAS writes the new observation to the end of the SAS dataset. This process continues until all of the observations are read. The data step executes once for each observation in the input data unless otherwise directed by additional statements.